Well, good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate your being here. My name is Jeff Newberry. I am a professor of English in the Department of English and Communication. I'm also a lecturer in residence. And I'm happy to welcome you to the first of three poets we'll have this year on the Georgia Poetry Circuit. The Georgia Poetry Circuit is a consortium of 10 Georgia colleges around the state that was formed 21 years ago. And the goal of the Georgia Poetry Circuit is to bring in big-name poets to read in Georgia colleges. We have the Southern Circuit and Northern Circuit. Our first reader this year on the Southern Circuit is Ashely M. Jones. Ashely M. Jones is the Poet Laureate of the state of Alabama. She received an MFA in poetry from Florida International University, where she was the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation Fellow. She served as the official poet for the City of Sunrise, Florida's Little Free Libraries Initiative from 2013 to 2014. And her work was recognized in 2014 Poets and Writers Maureen Egan Writers Exchange Contest and in the 2015 Academy of American Poets Contest for FIU. She's been a finalist in several book contests, including the Hub City Review, the New Southern Voices Contest, the Crab Orchard First Book Contest, and the Poetry First Book Award Contest. Her work has appeared in a number of print and online journals, including Poetry Magazine, Tupelo Quarterly, Prelude, Steel Tube Review, Ford's Review, Public Policy, Harvard Journal of African American Public Policy, Pluck, Valley Voices, and many, many others. Right now, she spends most of her time teaching when she's not traveling everywhere. As part of her duties as Poet Laureate, she runs the Magic City Poetry Festival, which happens every year in Birmingham, the Magic City. She also teaches at the Alabama School of Arts, where she teaches creative writing to high school students. And I've been spending time with her today, and I haven't met a more warm, welcoming, just gracious person. So I'm so happy that you came to hear her read. And thank you again. So let's give Renee back welcome.
So I'm Ashely, as Jeff said. I'm excited to be here in Tifton, Georgia. I've never been here before. And I'm really excited to read some poems to y'all. I have 8 poems to read. I always give the number because I'm sort of an anxious listener to poetry, so I like to know what I'm in for. So if you'd like, you can count yourself down just so you know how close I am to being done. And they're going to be from all of my books and even some new poems that I have. So the first poems that I want to read are all about my dad. My dad was a fire chief and a paramedic. He passed away last year very unexpectedly at the age of 59. So you can imagine how that's kind of still on my mind. It's a very difficult world to live in without my dad in it, but he's sort of everywhere now. He's not just within his body, he's all over. An example of that is driving in this morning, I drove through the town of Omega, Georgia, and I had never heard of that before. My dad was a member of the fraternity called Q Psi Phi, Omega Psi Phi, and he loved his fraternity, and he was a fireman, like I said. So the first thing I saw when I drove through Omega was Omega Fire Station, and I said, okay, Dad, I guess you're here. So I thought I would read a few poems about him. The first one is about a food that I used to eat with my dad. I talked about this food with some 6th graders in Lafayette, Louisiana a couple of days ago, and they all thought I was just the most disgusting person in the world. So we'll see what y'all think about this. There is a food called hoghead cheese or souse meat. I know you know. I know that you know. Has anybody out there ever had this before? Any of the younger in the back, y'all had it? Do you like it? The person who raised their hand, you like it? So when I was a kid, my dad used to buy this for us. And I didn't really know what it was as a kid. Like, the biggest mistake you can make is reading the ingredients of something. And I made that mistake, and like I just can't do it anymore. If you don't know what hoghead cheese is, it is a processed meat product made out of pig head parts. So it tastes and looks exactly how you might imagine. It's kind of a grayish, gelatinous thing. And my dad would always eat it over crackers. And when I was a kid, I wanted to do whatever my dad did, so I did it. I ate it, I loved it. So I wrote a series of haiku that make up this poem about that experience, and it's called Hoghead Cheese Haiku. My dad would slice it over crackers, each sliver a gravelly gray. Hogshead boiled down, too flat to recognize as hog anymore, now souse. We ate it, joy spilled like salt between our fingers, like hog between them. This meal, so special because Dad made it for us, a secret treasure. We did not know these meals, hoghead cheese, canned sausage, rice and rice and rice, told us we weren't rich. We thought, delicacy, treat. What steak could top this? And what magic lies within a pig's head, pig's foot? This unnatural dairy, this gray cheese made of snout, flesh, feet, and heart, congealed, sour art. So we're gonna go to my first book. And I'm still talking about my dad because, again, I'm always thinking about him now. And I'm so glad that poetry can capture memory in the way that it does. You can go back to those moments that are gone physically through art and through poetry specifically. You can revisit those people and they can live through the work. So this poem is one about Christmas, and we're getting to that time of year. So I love to think about this memory that for a long time was still going on. And I'll explain once I read the poem, but my parents were very, very adamant that we all their children, knew our own history and that we were proud of being Black, that we saw Blackness in every single thing, in God, in our dolls, in whatever we touched. They wanted us to know that being Black was something to celebrate and something that people shouldn't make us feel bad about. So that translated over to Christmas as well. And I'm gonna read this poem that talks about something that my dad did, which we still have this thing that I'm gonna mention today, and it's awesome. So this is called How to Make Your Daughters Culturally Aware and Racially Content During Christmas Time. And I'll just disclaim, these are my views. I'm not saying you have to believe these things, it's just this is what I think. Remind them, Jesus is Black. Despite the pictures Granny has hung on the wall, despite the glowing good old boy on her pile of church fans, Jesus was a brother, a bruh, not a bro. Hair of wool, you tell them. Buy a new nativity set, Mary with her press and curl, Joseph with a fade, baby Jesus fresh out the womb and curly. Go to a roadside Christmas shop. Buy a pale, smiling Santa. Let your daughters wonder how he turned brown overnight, how Santa's face became just like their own, brown and buttery, a Yuletide miracle. When you're trimming your plastic tree, the one you've had since the 80s, put on Rudolph, bopped by the Temptations, deck the halls by Smokey, Donny Hathaway's This Christmas, and Gladys Knight's deep brown voice crooning Jingle Bells. Fill the tree skirt with tightly wrapped gifts. Anticipate your daughter's unbreakable smiles when they rip off the paper to reveal an army of Black Barbies and brown baby dolls. Thank you. So we still have that Santa. My dad painted it overnight. And it really meant a lot to us to see Santa looking like we did. It seems maybe like a small detail, but it really did matter as kids to know, okay, even these imaginary things, I can see myself in them. I can participate in this holiday and not feel like it's not made for me. So the last one about my dad that I'll read is from my latest book. And my dad, like I said, was a fireman and a paramedic. But he had an artistic side as well. He actually could do portraiture using just pencil. He drew pictures of me and all my siblings using a pencil, and they look awesome. It was just something he did for fun. He didn't take any classes for it. He just had a natural ability. And he let his artistic side shine in other ways as well. He was also a gardener. So we had these beautiful gardens in every backyard for every house we ever lived in. And we always had vegetables and fruit to eat. And over the pandemic, we ate very well because my dad grew all this amazing stuff and he kept our basement stocked up with like canned goods, like he was made for survival times, truly. So this poem is about all of that. I wrote it actually as a commission for the Southern Foodways Alliance, an organization that talks about food, deals with food. And they had a meeting in Birmingham in, I think, 2018, and they asked me to write a poem about food and labor. So I interviewed my dad and asked him how he started gardening. He told me this very incredible story, which thankfully I recorded, so now I can listen to him, you know, even after he has passed, about how he started gardening to eat. He and his 10 other siblings needed food. They lived in an abusive situation with their dad and their mom. And so they were on their own for a lot of the day, and they said, we'll just grow some food. And they did. And he kept doing that until he died. He was doing it until the day he died. So this poem is called Photosynthesis. When I was young, my father taught us how dirt made way for food, how to turn over soil so it would hold a seed, an infant bud, how the dark could nurse it until it broke its green arms out to touch the sun. In every backyard we've ever had, he made a little garden plot with room for heirloom tomatoes, corn, carrots, peppers, jalapeno, bell and poblano, okra, eggplant, lemons, collards, broccoli, pole beans, watermelon, squash, trees filled with fruit and nuts, Brussels sprouts, herbs, basil, mint, parsley, rosemary, onions, sweet potatoes, cucumber, cantaloupe, cabbage, oranges, Swiss chard and peaches, sunflowers tall and straight-backed as soldiers, lantana, amaryllis, echinacea, pansies and roses and bushes bubbling with hydrangeas. Every plant with its purpose, flowers to bring worms and wasps, how their work matters here. This is the work we have always known, pulling food and flowers from a pile of earth. The difference now, my father is not a slave, not a sharecropper. This land is his, and so is this garden, so is this work. The difference is that he owns this labor, the work of his own hands for his own belly, for his own children's bellies. We eat because he works. This is the legacy of his grandmother, my great-granny, Ollie Mae Harris, and her untouchable flower garden. Just like her hats, her flower beds sprouted something special, plants and colors the neighbors could only dream of. He was young when he learned that this beauty was built on work. The cows and the factories in their stomachs, the fertilizer they spewed out, the stink that brought such fragrance. What you call waste, I call power. What you call work, I make beautiful again. In his garden, even problems become energy, beauty. My father has ended many work days in the backyard, worries of the firehouse dropping like grain. My father wrist deep in soil. I am convinced the earth speaks back to him as he feeds it. It is a conversational labor, gardening. The seeds tell him what they will be. The soil tells seeds how to grow. My father speaks sun and water into the earth. We hear him each harvest, his heartbeat sweet like fruit.
I love that.
Thank you, thank you. Matters. Family Matters was a show that was on from like 1988 until like 2000 maybe. And I don't want to know when you were born, like, I don't want to know that every year. I'm 32, but my students make me feel like I'm like 10,000 years old, truly. But this show was set in Chicago, and it has a family, Family Matters. The Winslow family is the main family that you follow. The dad, Carl, is a police officer in Chicago. The mom, Harriet, she starts out as an elevator operator, and I'm not going to explain what that is either, because I'm realizing y'all don't know what that means either. And then they have 2 kids, Laura, who's like the perfect girl next door, and Eddie, who's like a jock, perfect son. And they have this neighbor named Steve Urkel, who's a stereotypical nerd. He bothers them to no end, but they also love him. And the show follows the hijinks that ensue when Steve infiltrates this family. Okay, so I was watching that show, and there was a scene in an early season where Harriet, the mom, and her sister Rachel, who lived with them for a time, were cleaning collard greens. I had never seen anybody do this on a show ever in life. I was just like, what is going on? They're cleaning greens. So it was so amazing to see that very Southern moment, because we know that Chicago is made up of Southern people. They migrated up there. But also to see this black family doing this thing that I saw my mom doing all the time, it just was so exciting to me. So I stopped, I paused, because I was watching it on some streaming thing. This wasn't in the 90s, this was like a few years ago. I was rewatching. I paused it and I started writing this sestina. And for those who don't know, a sestina is a poem, a form poem, and the form requires that you have 6 ending words. So I'm going into teacher mode, y'all, I'm sorry. But in the sestina, you have 6-line stanzas. Each line ends with a particular word, and in each stanza that follows, you rearrange those ending words. So you'll kind of hear them as I read. They keep repeating and repeating. And this poem starts in that episode of Family Matters, and then it goes into my own memory of my mom cleaning collard greens. Harriet Winslow and Aunt Rachel clean collard greens on primetime television. In their dollhouse kitchen, they clean a bouquet of collards while the comedy of errors unfolds around them. Harriet, in her pantsuit, and that black mother smirk that signals the hard love only a mother can muster. This holy kitchen, culinary sanctuary, covers them in light, its white glory a bouquet around their perfect hair. Their fingers know no errors as they pick and place the collards. There was an earthy magic in my mother cleaning collards, their mineral scent, the sink full of water my mother plunged them into, the water which washed them of their errors, greens baptized, clean from sediment and rock, our kitchen sink her pulpit, the leafy bouquet her holy book. How we wished we could be them, touched by our mother's godly hands, then cleaned so well we forgot they were just collards. They glistened, a sparkling bouquet of dinner yet to come, so loved by our mother that even they forgot their natural bitterness. A kitchen is sweetened when collards are cooking, the air a swelling pork fat perfume, the onions pungent terror nulled by the ribboned greens. I loved to watch my mother cut them, roll the piles of flat foliage up like a cigar, the kitchen knife shining against a tight army of collards. We needed no superheroes when we had her, a mother to rival every black mom on cable. No fragrant bouquet could rival the smell of her greens and cornbread, the bouquet of cotton swabs and peroxide she'd use to sanitize our playground errors. She was a magician, more than just another mother. She could turn an afro into a constellation of braids, adorn them with a galaxy of beads. She could turn a sprawling batch of collards into a smooth and savory feast, a world exploding in her small kitchen. Someday, mother, I will inherit that sweet bouquet of cocoa butter, blue magic, kitchen smoke, and calm night air, the perfume of black motherhood. One day, I will learn how to cook them collards.
That's just so rich.
Thank you. So moving on, we are on our 5th poem if you're counting. This poem is about Harriet Tubman. So she is one of my heroes, and I mean, I think all of us who live in America, really just on planet Earth, should consider her a hero. She was incredible. She did so much for black people and for America in general. And so I've written a lot about her, and this poem is new. It's a part of a suite of 4 that I wrote for an orchestra composition that was done by Dr. Rebecca Griffin Green. She was commissioned by my school to do an original piece, so we worked together to create this piece. I wrote the poems, and then from the poems, she wrote the music. And I performed with my school's orchestra a few weeks ago, and it was a really incredible experience. The only thing about reading these poems now is that I'm almost tempted to just do the rhythm that she wrote in her music, which won't make any sense without the music. So I'm going to try to read it in my own rhythm. But this one is about Harriet Tubman's injury. So if you're not familiar with her story, she made her way to the Underground Railroad and to escaping because of an injury she sustained from the person who owned her. So that person hit her in the head with an anvil or some other piece of iron, and after that injury, she said she saw visions from God, and God showed her how to escape and that she would need to lead others out of slavery. So this poem talks about that. It's called Holy Head Harriet. The eye of God is planted between my brow. The eye of God is opening at the top of my head. The eye of God was made with blood, was made from the hands of an ungodly master. The eye of God pierced my head in two. The eye of God said, "Look," and I saw it. The eye of God showed me rivers and fields and trees that would shelter me on my way. The eye of God told me I would not be enslaved. The eye of God showed me all the shades of my humanity, showed me how to see my people, my people. My people are the eye of God too. My people bloom from my brow. My people are the top of my head and the soles of my feet. My people are made with blood. My people are hurting at the hands of an ungodly master. My people have pierced me in two. My people said, "Look," and I saw them. My people showed me their blood in the rivers. My people showed me their blood in the fields. My people showed me their bodies in the trees and the shelter I could make for them on my way. My people told me they were not enslaved. My people showed me all the shades of my humanity. My people showed me how to see my people, how to see my God. My God and my people are made of the same cloth, the same blood. My people showed up in my vision, and I said, "Oh, God, show me how to make a way." Not yet. I've posted my sister's video of it on my Facebook page, but they did have cameras recording it. So whenever they get that together, I think it'll be available. But right now it's not. But if afterward you want me to just pull it up for you, I'm happy to do that and show you or send it to somebody and you can see the video that I posted of it. But it was a really exciting experience and just so wonderful to celebrate Harriet Tubman in that way with the music and with the students as well. It just was really exciting for me to just drown in all of that greatness of Tubman and of the music. So I'm gonna read another new poem. And this one, I'm gonna try to show it to you in a moment. So we'll see how that goes. Or if you're in the back, y'all have phones, you can look it up and look at it, because that's a long way to go back there. But this poem is one that I wrote as a commission for the Oxford American magazine. They did a Juneteenth folio this summer, and they asked me to write 4 poems about food and history. And so being the good Southerner that I am, I said, well, I'll just do a meat and 3. So that's what I did. And hopefully everybody's cool with meat and 3s. Everybody eats meat and 3 stuff. I don't know if that's like dying off with the younger generation, if people know what that means. But that's what I did. So the poems are about different foods and they incorporate history as well. So this poem is about Hoppin' John, which is of course black eyed peas and white rice. And we eat this, many of us eat this on New Year's Day because we must. My mom makes sure that we always eat this, even if we're not in her actual house. She will call and say, do you have all your stuff on your plate? Do not go into the new year without your luck and your money. That's what the greens and the rice and the peas mean. And I did a little research on this for this poem, and I learned that some of these traditions do date back to American slavery, like many things we do in America. So that's in the poem as well. I guess for the younger people, I mentioned Betty Davis. She was a film actress who was very famous, really awesome actress, one of my favorite classic actresses. She had these big eyes, so there was the phrase Betty Davis eyes. I mentioned that here. And the form. Okay, so the form of this poem is really exciting to me. It's a syncopated sonnet. So this form is not my own. I borrowed it from a poet named Tyehimba Jess. He had a book called Olio that came out several years ago, and that book was a huge book, first of all. Like it's big and thick. It took him 10 years to write that book, and it's all about Black performance. And he uses so many forms in that book. There are sonnets, there are crowns of sonnets, there are golden shovels, there are double golden shovels, there are poems you can fold into origami. It's ridiculous. It's truly ridiculous, all that he does. So I decided to use this form, and the syncopated sonnet is a sonnet which is also a contrapuntal poem. Contrapuntal poem is one that can be read contrapuntally or in any direction. So typically, they will have 2 columns, maybe 3. You can read them down each column and across. In Jess's book, usually you can read them any way you want to. You can start from the middle and it'll make sense to the end. Like, it's ridiculous. Truly. So I decided to just do a nice standard one. I didn't do all the things. But in my syncopated sonnet, one side is for Black Eyed Peas, one side is for Rice. You can read it down both sides and across. And each side is a sonnet. They share a final couplet, and it's using the Shakespearean rhyme scheme. So as far as y'all can, I'm gonna just go here. Y'all can kind of see what it looks like. And if you're in the back, you can just look up a Meet and Three for the Jubilee, Ashely M. Jones, and you will find all those poems. And you're over here, I'm just gonna pop over here to you. That's what it looks like. So I'm gonna read it all 3 ways, which does take a little bit of time, so bear with me. So here we go. It takes a lot of breath also to read it 3 ways, but it's fun. I worked really hard on this poem, so I'm gonna read it all the ways that it can go. Hoppin' John, a blues. She's got some eyes. Betty Davis, no, black. On our plates, she shimmies between the rice and makes a lucky meal where there is lack. Not lima, pinto, just black eyes suffice. What alchemy, where peas become pennies, where even here we can be rich with pork. This meal is tender medicine, ready to heal what keeps us broken, to unyoke ourselves away from helpless and enslaved. We slice, we sear, we simmer, and we braise. We hunt, we chop, we pick, we stand amazed. We serve it up, and then we offer praise. Black-eyed peas and white rice on New Year's Day. We pray this meal will keep the doom away. The white blending around it, a whole note, supple with salt and onion and butter. This marriage on our Sunday plate, we float. This here's a John that hops like no other. The currency we want is born of soil, stewed and heaped while the crops break for winter, when we need fresh, warm hope brought to the boil, so we're not chained to ruin. We splinter and we build ourselves a future. We cook it down until it's soft enough to eat. We count our blessings, count the faith it took to be here, to have vegetables and meat. Black-eyed peas and white rice on New Year's Day. We pray this meal will keep the doom away. She's got some eyes. Betty Davis, no, black. The white blending around it, a whole note on our plates. She shimmies between the rice, supple with salt and onion and butter, and makes a lucky meal where there is lack. This marriage on our Sunday plate, we float. Not lima, pinto, just black eyes suffice. This here is a John that hops like no other. What alchemy, where peas become pennies? The currency we want is born of soil, where even here we can be rich with pork, stewed and heaped while the crops break for winter. This meal is tender medicine, ready when we need fresh, warm hope brought to the boil, to heal what keeps us broken, to unyoke so we're not chained to ruin. We splinter ourselves away from helpless and enslaved, and we build ourselves a future. We cook, we slice, we sear, we simmer, and we braise it down until it's soft enough to eat. We hunt, we chop, we pick, we stand amazed. We count our blessings, count the faith it took. We serve it up, and then we offer praise to be here, to have vegetables and meat. black-eyed peas and white rice on New Year's Day. We pray this meal will keep the doom away. Okay, we are on the last two poems. Y'all made it. Congratulate yourselves. You made it through. So one more new one and then a not so new. So this one, I think I've literally never read it out loud to like people before. It's also a part of a project that I'm doing. I do a lot of projects with people. That's something a lot of young poets don't realize. You don't have to just be alone in your office. Like there's lots of cool stuff you can do with other artists with your work. So this poem is a part of an episode of an online show called The History of White People in America. And it's made by, I think it's called like World TV, or it's distributed by World TV and distributed by PBS as well. It's an animated short series that tells the history of America, basically, and it also uses song. So often the episode is sung or rapped or whatever. And so they asked me to write an episode, and I wrote a poem that's the text for this episode. And it hasn't come out yet. They're still doing the animations for it. I'm very excited to see it. I cannot wait to see what it looks like. But they asked me to write an episode about Black women in the 1800s. Didn't matter what I chose, just something about that kind of person. So I did some research, and I had actually been recently, when I wrote this, to the, what is the name of that museum? The museum in Montgomery that Brian Stevenson created. What is the museum called? His thing is called the Equal Justice Initiative. Don't remember the name of the museum, but it's that museum that hopefully everybody has heard of, that tells the history of Black people in America from slavery to mass incarceration. It's a really incredible museum. If you're ever in Montgomery, I encourage you to go and just take your time. It's a lot of information, and if you're not aware of our country's history, you will be very just opened when you go to that museum. You do? Oh wow, yeah, it's heavy. It's a heavy place to go. But I think very necessary if you really want to know what happened here. And we all should want that. If we love our country, we should want to know what happened. So I had just been there, and I learned about the time in our country when the international slave trade was abolished, and so the domestic slave trade kind of picked up the slack. And so what happened was a lot of people who were in the North, what we consider the North, were sold down south, and of course that was what you didn't want to be sold to because the South was notorious for being harder than the North. I think you could make the argument that being enslaved anywhere is pretty terrible, but in the South it was kind of just different, I'll say it that way. So I found this story of a woman named Anne Williams who was enslaved in Maryland, actually, and she was going to be sold down to the South, and they had separated her from her daughters and her husband. And what she did when she learned this news was she was at this auction house, this famous auction house, and she jumped out of the third floor window. Once they said, you know, you're getting split up from all your people, she just walked out of the window. She ended up, I think, breaking her legs, but she survived the fall. And she ended up, years later, she, with the help of Francis Scott Key, who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, he was a lawyer, he helped her get her freedom. And she also got her children's freedom years later. So that story was just so interesting to me. I had never heard anything like it, and so I decided to write about that incident. So this poem is all about that. It's called All God's Children Got Wings. And I used the spiritual, All God's Children Got Wings, as sort of an inspiration for how I could kind of walk through her life and imagine what it might take to walk out of an open window, not knowing if you die or whatever. So that's what this poem is about. It has two epigraphs to begin it. It has the lyrics of the spiritual, and they go, I got wings, you got wings. I'm not going to sing it because I can't sing. Like, thank your lucky stars that I'm not singing it to you. It goes, I got wings, you got wings, all of God's children got wings. When I get to heaven, gonna put on my wings. I'm gonna fly all over God's heaven. Everybody talking about heaven ain't going there. Gonna fly all over God's heaven. And then a quote from Anne Williams about her walking out of the window. She said, they brought me away with two of my children and wouldn't let me see my husband. They didn't sell my husband and I didn't want to go. I was so confused and distracted that I didn't know hardly what I was about, but I didn't want to go, and I jumped out of the window. But I am sorry now that I did it. They have carried my children off with them to Carolina. So all God's children got wings. When I was born, God gave me wings, feathers fit to fly, the wide breadth of the open sky. When I was born, God said, "You are," and I was. This place called Maryland can't own my flesh. This place called America can't own my blood. No master over my love or my womb. No master, no man making devil's deals. No mistress holding her skin above mine. No $5 flat enough to sell me. They say I'm going south. They can't take us from Africa anymore, so they'll just take us from here. Can the capital's shadow hide this sin? In the South, the sun is mad just like we are. It burns the whole land to spite the men who make us work it. It reminds us that something in this world can be warm. My children are traded for vulgar currency. And I remember God said, "You are made of wings." And then I remember the sky, its gift, those clouds which they cannot hold, and my soul. I remember that God does not know their names. No slave master will see the pearly gates. And the window, it says, "You are." It says, "I got wings, feathers fit to fly." When I get to heaven, there'll be no bones to break, no families unglued by the spit of Satan. I'm gonna fly all over God's heaven. I'm gonna fly. Okay. Last poem. Yay. You say encore? Last poem. So this one is in my latest book, and it is one that I started to call my greatest hit because ever since I published it, I feel like I've read it everywhere, always. Like I'm never not reading this poem, which is not a bad thing. I like the poem quite a lot, but I had to start not reading it because I felt like I was doing it too much. But I got to read this poem actually in a very interesting place. I was invited to Good Morning America last year, which was amazing. Poets never really get to do anything like that, honestly. But it was right after my appointment as Poet Laureate because of the historic nature of my appointment. I'm the first person of color and the youngest person to ever hold that position in Alabama. And it's been, I think, 92 years since the position's creation. So it was a pretty incredible thing for that barrier to have been finally broken after almost 100 years. So I decided to read this poem when I was on that program to sort of show people that in the South, and in Alabama specifically, we're not a monolith. We all have different views. We're not whatever people think we are. People like to say, "Oh, Alabama, they're backwards, they're this, they're that." We're just like everybody else. We all have different thoughts and beliefs, and we're not necessarily represented by the views of our government. A lot of us are actually very progressive, very accepting, and very eager to form a loving community. That's not always reflected in the media because, of course, the loudest voices are usually those which have certain kinds of opinions. So I wanted to show that somebody from Alabama could have a different thought. And also I wanted to remind the nation that it doesn't make sense to scapegoat Alabama or the South. You can't just say, well, the South is bad. That's where all the bad stuff still happens. Yes, bad things do happen here, but even if we go all the way back to the times of slavery, the whole country has always been involved in that discussion. Always, the whole country had something to think about when it came to how they treated Black people. Even, people say, well, there were the plantations down there. Yes, but who used cotton? Everybody. Who used sugar? Everybody. And when those enslaved people went to the North, where they met with a good life? Not necessarily, not at all. So this poem talks about that, and it begins with a quote from Dr. King. It's also a sonnet, which is exciting. I like sonnets quite a lot. And the poem is called "All Y'all Really from Alabama," because people really are. Everybody has a cousin or somebody from Alabama, whether they claim that person or not. Excuse me. So Dr. King's quote reads, "The straitjackets of race prejudice and discrimination do not wear only Southern labels. The subtle psychological technique of the North has approached in its ugliness and victimization of the Negro the outright terror and open brutality of the South. And that's from Dr. King's book, Why We Can't Wait. This here, the cradle of this here nation. Everywhere you look, roots run right back south. Every vein filled with red dirt, blood, cotton. We the dirty words you spit out your mouth. Mason-Dixon is an imagined line. You can theorize it or wish it real, but it's the same old ghost, see-through, benign. All y'all from Alabama. We the wheel turning cotton to make the nation move. We the scapegoat in a land built from death. No longitude or latitude disproves the truth of Founding Fathers' sacred oath. We hold these truths like dark snuff in our jaw. Black oppression's not happenstance, it's law. Thank you very much.